Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits video. Alright, a whole new series here that will start this go around. Thank you for your continued suggestions. I'm going to be doing these probably throughout the end of the week. And as I mentioned with the suggestions video, the ones I'm looking for are the ones that are the most recently dated, i.e. the ones stories like the locations or the houses or maybe even some of the ghosts or entities themselves that people most recently started talking about. So great suggestions. I'm going to talk about the rest later on this week. This one has already been suggested so many times before. I was really hesitant on talking about it only because I don't really want to delve too much into this particular part of the ghosts and spirits world, but I did just reach 10,000 subscribers, so thank you so much for that. I'm probably going to make a dedication video sometime soon. And so as a nice thank you for everyone's continued support, this heavily suggested Ghost and Spirit I'll talk about here. But I'm going to go with the standpoint that I'm going to try to analyze it more like from a scientific standpoint and see and try to dispel and see like what other areas this thing could be. Very, very popular suggestion. And so many people seem to be experiencing it nowadays. It was interesting to find out that it's more of a recent phenomenon of sorts, and it has to do with the ghosts slash spirits known as the shadow people. If you've heard of that term, and I'm sure you have, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're these strange entities of some sort. I don't know if they're ghosts, I don't know if they're spirits. I'm going to present all these angles here in a minute of what they could be, but they seem to frequent all parts of the world, all different types of people, and they seem to have the same characteristics within them. That's what makes it so fascinating. Unlike the experiences that people have with ghosts and spirits with with cryptids and monsters, where generally each specific region of the world has their own separate cryptid or monster. Here, this shadow people stuff, this seems to be the same across the entire world. So, quite fascinating stuff. Now, I'm not going to talk about stuff like how to summon them or what to do as far as trying to entice them or hunting them or even dispelling them. None of that stuff, because again, I don't want to delve into that world too much. It's just purely going to be more from a scientific, kind of like an analyzation type standpoint. So what are the shadow people? Well, again, as I mentioned, they're this strange type of entity. They either come as individuals or they come as groups, and they seem to frequent people in their rooms, wherever they could be, maybe in a bedroom or in some other type of the house, and they seem to just do something as far as just staring at people or just observing people, or in some cases doing other things outright more frightful. But in either case, they all seem to have the same characteristics. It's a blackish type entity of some sort, vague outline, humanoid figure, has the same characteristics as, let's say, your average human, but for the fact that the entire entity has like a wispy, blackish, ghost-like hue to it. And then the most common characteristic of the shadow people is that they seem to have reddish eyes. Some people describe them as looking almost like Sauron type eyes, where they're glowing. They emanate some kind of effect from them, and then others mention that the eyes just are hollow altogether, but still they seem to have the same characteristics all around. And where they're found and when they're found, the where again seems to be, people seem to find them most common within their own bedrooms, which is quite frightful when you think about it, because there you are, you're at home, you think you're in a safe place, this is your home, this is your castle, this is where you're pretty much just trying to relax and make sure that nothing bad is happening, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the night, which is another characteristic, it seems to be always in the middle of the night, people wake up, they have the feeling that something is just staring at them, and not just staring at them, but just staring at them with this intense aspect, like it's an intensity that they haven't felt before. they turn around, and when they do so, then that's when they see this thing. Now, there's two types of shadow people that people seem to see the most, and this is what, again, is so fascinating, because you would think that there would be, if these were really are quote unquote people, that just like people here on the earth, there's so many different characteristics, so many different versions of people. No, in this case, there's two that seem to be the most common. One is you're looking at here, known as the Hat Man, and the main reason is, of course, because of the shape of a hat that looks to be resting on top of its head, and it seems to have also what looks to be some kind of trench coat, or it's wearing some kind of long overcoat of some sort. This is one of the creatures or the entities that people see a lot. And then the second one has to do with this one, the hooded figure. So instead of seeing something as far as a shadow person with a hat, in this case they see it with a hood. Like, let's say you would normally see like a monk wear in one of those movies having to do with medieval times. Same concept, but still here it has to do with a shadow person. And the stories are all the same. The people turn, they see these two types, and then in some cases they see a third type, which is just a regular, I guess you call it a regular shadow person, with no let's say artificial thing that they're wearing, like a hood or a hat, just by themselves, just their head as is. But they see this thing and it is just staring at them. Now, different people have said that sometimes the way they get the feeling from these things, whatever they're doing as they're staring at them, some people say that it's just staring at them, but they don't feel any bad will, or they don't feel any goodwill. They just happen to see something observing them. And then others say that they feel like an intense hatred, or in some cases like an intense evil of some sort. Like whatever this thing is, it is staring at them with such malice that it freaks that person out, understandably so. Because that person, again, they're in their home, they're in their bedroom, they're in the comfort of their bed, they're supposed to be in one of the safest places of all, and then they wake up to this staring straight at them. And that's it. People don't really say much of anything else, because what happens, and again, this is the same characteristic all around, whenever this shadow person is noticed, these shadow people, for all of their, I guess, evil-like characteristics, from being like a dark whispery shadow to those glowing red eyes to the staring within such an intense malice, they simply disappear. Like they either are surprised that that they're found. Like people, that when they see them, they state that the shadow people almost look back like in a shock, like they can't believe that they're being looked at themselves, and so they either disappear instantly, or in other cases, people state that the shadow people then just walk backwards or walk to the side. The key is they walk to the nearest wall and then just disappear right through the wall. Others report some more kooky and kind of more frightful instances where the shadow people then either run up the wall or twitch up the wall or go towards the ceiling and disappear towards the ceiling. It's a whole bunch of stuff, but otherwise the characteristics are still the same, that the shadow people disappear. Now, there are a few rarer circumstances, and these poor folks, you can understandably tell why they're so frightened from them. Sometimes these shadow people actually seem to attack the people that they are observing. Like whenever they see the shadow person staring back, that's when the shadow person attacks. Like they'll actually jump up straight onto the bed and then start either strangling whoever this person is, or in some cases they just stare even closer now that they're basically lying on top of the person, and this person, whoever that poor sap is that's laying in the bed, either cannot control themselves, like they can't move anything, they're just completely, for whatever reason, like their body is just frozen, they can't change anything, or in other cases that person then starts reciting some passage from the Bible, or starts telling the shadow person to get off and to leave, and then the shadow person then leaves. But that seems to be the most extreme of cases, and thankfully the most rare sorts. There's a great website called shadowpeople.org. If you ever want a good scare, check out that website. You're going to see literally hundreds and hundreds of stories of people and their encounters with shadow people. I mean, you can spend all day, you can spend all week, and you still will not run out of stories to go through. And again, you will find that most of them seem to say the same stuff that I just mentioned. Same type of encounters, same type of shadow people, same type of reactions, and then that's it. Also, what's interesting is that on a few rarer occasions, shadow people seem to be found outside of homes. People see them sometimes outside, let's say, while they're at work, or sometimes people see them in a field. I remember reading stuff from people saying that they were walking home, and then through the blur or some kind of motion on the side of their eye, they see something and it looks like a shadow of a person, i.e. a shadow person. And then when that happens, that shadow person again is surprised that they were found, and so the shadow person moves with such a blur, almost like the flash of sorts, and it moves and it runs away as quickly as possible. Just completely abnormal the way it moves. And they're purported, just look it up on YouTube, you'll see people have purported video of shadow people in action outside. And if those are true, then you can see the motion and the speed with which they move altogether. Now, I mentioned early on that it seems to be that the notion of shadow people is a fairly recent phenomenon, and it has to do with that great show Coast to Coast AM, because before this time, there probably was talk about shadow people, but it wasn't as, I guess, present as it was today. But the Coast to Coast AM show definitely brought shadow people into the forefront. There was a show sometime in 2001, April 12th, and that's when several guests within the show started to talk about shadow people. And this seemed to be the catalyst because probably a lot of the listeners to the show were experiencing this phenomenon, but because no one else was really talking about it, they didn't really move with their own experience forward. But once that happened, the floodgates seemed to open, and then more shows, and the Coast to Coast AM shows, started to discuss the notion of shadow people, which brought on more people talking about their experiences, and then it grew from there. It's so much so to the point now that when you talk with anybody involving anything as far as ghosts and spirits, there's like a little subsection now dedicated to shadow people. And again, that website shadowpeople.org has so many experiences. I mean, this is the by far one of the most cumulative websites you can see and hear with regards to those experiences. And you'll see a bunch of photos too. Photos are quite rare when it comes to shadow people because they are so hard to get a hold of. Again, these things are so surprised by their presence being known that they easily wisp away or run away as fast as possible. So the chance of someone taking out a cell phone and taking a picture at the right moment, it seems to be very hard. But you can find pictures, and you're looking at some of them here throughout my video, that showcase evidence of these supposed shadow people. One last thing too about shadow people and where they're found, they also tend to be found in many haunted places, like a lot of those insane asylums that Ghost Adventures visit, a lot of the prisons that Ghost Adventures visit, people that work there or have visited there on themselves. A lot of tourists too mention that they've seen these shadow people after their experience there, and it seems to be the same concept. The shadow people just roam around the place, not really like doing anything bad to the people around there, but definitely making their presence known. And so Ghost Adventures absolutely highlights them as another phenomenon. Even one of my favorite movies, District 9, kind of points to the notion of shadow people. There's that very brief and scary scene when that Lucas guy, the Josh Lucas guy, is trying to dig for that treasure of sorts in the basement, and then he hears something in the darkness like coming towards him, and there's a very brief shot of what looks like a dark silhouette, which is exactly like a shadow person. Whether that is a shadow person or was the shadow of something else, like one of the other people within the asylum, like the main guy that went nuts, who knows, but that they also alluded to it. Now, as far as what shadow people could be, there are several different areas to talk about and what they could be altogether. So I'll talk about the most common things. The first thing that they could be are ghosts. Like, instead of, let's say, your average ghost involving white wispy trails, and let's say transparency. This just could be another variation of a ghost, and that kind of ties into what I was just mentioning about shadow people being found in insane asylums and being found in jails. People that have died there could come back as ghosts, but in this case, instead of being the traditional ghost where you see a figure of some sort and it definitely looks like that past person, or it looks like let's say like that person is still there actually, but just happens to be a little bit transparent. No, in this case it's another version of the ghost where it's a dark silhouette, but in this case glowing red eyes. Not too many people buy into this as far as it being a ghost, only because shadow people just seem to have just so many different characteristics than ghosts, but that's at least one aspect. The other one is a little bit more bad. You don't want it to be this, and that is there's some people believe that shadow people are in fact like what the very definition from the Bible of what demons and other bad spirits are, that these are actual entities from either hell or who knows where else that have come to earth and then try to essentially scare people, influence people, to make people do bad things. Who knows? But those are another aspect altogether. Again, very hard to prove, only because from a scientific standpoint, anything religious is a little hard to prove, but yet that's another aspect. But that does tie into what I was mentioning earlier, where people were stating that they were almost attacked by these things. They were being choked by these things. Their breath was almost cut to death almost, and then also them having their body paralyzed. These all seem to be traits of like demonic attacks, so that's another aspect. Now for a more scientific standpoint, there are some people that believe that these things are actually time travelers, that they may even be humans just from another era of some sort. And the idea is that sometime, I don't know how far in the future, or I don't know if it's from another dimension altogether, but the idea is that whatever those people or versions of people are, they found a way to travel to our time, our universe, our specific Earth. And when they do so with the intent of observing ourselves as humans. And that's why it ties into what I was mentioning a couple minutes back, when the shadow people seem to be found caught red-handed, like let's say staring at someone, that's when they act surprised, they act shocked, and then they try to run away as quickly as possible. So it could be tied to that. It's a long shot again, because how do you prove anything like this? But that seems to be another aspect with it altogether. There's an even more, I guess, I don't know if you could call it psychological, but definitely spiritual aspect, and that has to do with shadow people almost being astral bodies. There's the idea that when people have these quote-unquote out-of-body experiences, whether it's voluntarily or whether it's just out of the blue, like someone has an out-of-body experience and they're not even aware that they're having it, maybe when they're sleeping or they're out cold or something, that's when their spirit, their essence, whatever the thing is that makes them who they are, travels out their body, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing these versions of shadow people when in fact they're people that have these out-of-body experiences. Again, very, very hard to prove on that part. And then finally, there's one last thing that shadow people could be, and this is what people cite as, they could actually be aliens. They could be the very aliens that we see and cover in anything involving UFOs and visits to Earth. And this is because a lot of the people that have seen let's see, aliens or greys as they call them, especially the abductees, they've reported having experienced what looks to be very similar to these shadow people. They see stuff just in the corner of the eye. They see these things disappear through walls and then also come into a house that is normally protected, i.e. through like a fence, through an alarm system, through closed doors, through closed windows, yet they're there in their bedroom before they're abducted. And then there's also the notion that these aliens and ghosts, these aliens could also be observers, that they're there observing people, i.e. us, as they're doing their travels. And that ties into what I was mentioning earlier, where if they're caught, let's say red-handed staring, that's when they act surprised and they again try to go away as quickly as possible. There was that movie The Fourth Kind with the beautiful Resident Evil actress, and it kind of alluded to this because there's a very scary part of the film where she herself is experiencing an abduction, and when that happens you see it through a first person perspective of her, and you see her door, I can't remember if it either busted open or it slowly creeped open, but her bedroom door went open, and then you could briefly see just for a few seconds like these strange shadow beings come into the room, heavily distorted, heavily let's say looking like shadow people, where you can't see humanoid, but you can definitely see a humanoid like figure, and these things blur in very quickly, almost like in a flash, and then they abduct her altogether. So I think that they were going with that angle too, stating that shadow people could be tied to aliens as well. So all in all, pretty fascinating stuff when it comes to the world of shadow people. Very recent phenomenon when you consider that it was only up into the early 2000s that people really started to explore or reveal their experiences. If anyone has any more information that I didn't cover here about shadow people, it would be great to hear. No doubt, if you have any experiences, I'm going to have no doubt a lot of people within my viewership audience that have had something. Post those comments below. It'd be great to share them with everyone. Otherwise, good suggestion. I'm glad I was able to finally cover it as a nice thank you again for everyone for reaching 10,000 subscribers. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.